Countdown to Halloween 2023, featuring eerie and uncanny tales of haunts, ghosts, and suspense. October is finally here. Join us all month for special Halloween presentations on Storylink Radio's YouTube channel as we count down to Halloween 2023. Keep a close eye on YouTube alerts or you'll miss one. Celebrate October with us right here and now. Tonight's presentation from Storylink Radio. The Hole in the Ceiling. Michael knew that his 2-year-old sister Emily was a remarkable child. His best friend Bill also had a sister Emily's age, but the two girls were like night and day. Jeannie, Bill's sister, was a total pain. She was always getting into Bill's stuff, and she didn't make much sense when she tried to talk. Emily, on the other hand, was well behaved. She already spoke fairly well and could even hold simple conversation. But Emily had a wild imagination, and sometimes the things she said were a little odd. One day, while Michael was doing his homework, she toddled into the room and asked, "What are you doing?" Michael looked up from his math book to see Emily standing right next to him, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Homework. I'm a classy guy," he said with a groan. "I will help you," Emily offered, completely serious. Michael shook his head. "I don't think so, and not unless you can multiply fractions." Pops can," Emily said. Pops knows a lot of things." "Right." Michael watched as she went to his window. She placed her tiny hands against the glass and peered out. "But Pops only comes when it's dark. Not dark like this, though. Dark like at night." Michael glanced out the window. The afternoon was dull and dreary. According to the morning weather report, a major storm was barreling across the Pacific toward the coast. It was supposed to hit early that evening. Pops, that's the one with the wings, isn't it?" he asked. Emily had so many imaginary friends, it was hard to keep track of all of them, and this was one she made up a few days ago. "He lives in the attic and he comes into play through a hole in the ceiling, right?" "No, he doesn't live in the attic. He lives in the ceiling. I can see him and hear him sometimes, but he can't come in until he finds a way to open the door." She looked at her brother with a smile. "Would you tell me a story?" she asked, abruptly changing the subject. Michael glanced at his math book. "Not now, Em," he sighed. "I've got to get this done. Why don't you go play with your dolls or something? You know, I kind of think Picasso's right." Emily scowled slightly. "They won't play with me today. Pop scared them because he looks icky. He scared them when he made them fly. He said I could fly too if I wanted, and so could my toys. He said he'll teach me everything he knows." She paused, seeing that she had lost Michael's attention. "I'll ask Mommy if I could watch a video. Bye, Michael." She closed the door. Michael smiled as he heard his precocious little sister running down the hall. By dinner time, the storm had begun. Outside, the trees twisted and bowed in the wind, and cold rain fell in ragged sheets. "We're in for a big one," Michael's father commented as the family gathered at the table. "On my way home, traffic was backed up all the way to the interstate." He shook his head. "I'm sure glad I don't have to be out on a night like this. I don't think we've had anything this bad since the night Emily was born, remember?" "Yeah, how could I forget?" Michael's mother responded with a laugh. "Half the county was evacuated because of a flood warning, and I was in the delivery room. Hardly something I would forget, hon." A bolt of lightning flashed brightly outside the dining room window. Michael counted to himself. 1001, 1002, 1003. A deep roll of thunder rumbled overhead. "Then what happened?" Michael asked politely. He'd heard this story before, of course, but he knew she liked to tell it. "Well, everyone at the hospital was doing their best, but with the storm and all, there were lots of emergencies. All the nurses had their hands full. All the ride-out team was there. Just as Emmy was being born, the electricity went completely off." She snapped her fingers. "Just like that. Of course, the emergency lights kicked right in right away, and you can imagine what it was like." Michael's dad shot Emily a grin. "But my little girl made it safely into the world." "That she did," Michael's mom went on, smiling at his sister. "It was quite an experience. The lights went off a few times, if I remember." "Uh-huh," Emily chimed in. "That was when the blue lady put me with you and took the other one." Everyone turned to look at Emily. She was at it again. Every time Michael's mom told the story of Emily's birth, the 2-year-old mentioned the blue lady. Let me tell the story, honey, her mom said. I know you want to join in the conversation, but you couldn't possibly remember that night. Yes, I can, the little girl answered simply. Michael's parents exchanged glances. Well, her mom said softly, thinking back to that night. Actually, it's funny. I did imagine there was another woman in my hospital room. Um, but I certainly don't think she was blue. Anyway, I was pretty tired and I fell asleep for a bit. But I do remember waking up for a moment or two, noticing this woman huddled in the corner. The room was dark and I couldn't see very well, but she seemed very upset. I asked the nurse about it later. She said that no one else had been there and I must have been dreaming. Michael's mom shrugged. Still, I do remember. Now, don't you start imagining things, his dad interrupted. We already have one expert in make-believe in the family. He smiled, looking at his daughter. Our own little Emily. I think Gatsby's a bit of an expert, too, don't you? Emily furrowed her brow. What's an ex-perk? She asked. Everyone laughed. Michael parked his bike in the garage, pulled a tissue from his pocket, and dabbed at his nose. He'd always had problems with his allergies in the spring, but this season was a particularly bad one. I'm home, Mom, he called, slamming the door behind him. He knew that she had made a doctor's appointment for him that afternoon, so he'd come straight home from school. Hi, sweetie, she greeted him, car keys in hand. We got to get going right away. But I thought my appointment was at 4, Michael said, looking at his watch. It is, she responded, helping Emily with her raincoat. But I noticed Emily has a funny rash on her arms. Dr. Toccato said he'd take a look at her, too, if we came in right away. Look, Emily said proudly as she pushed up her sleeves. Michael could see that she had a scaly bluish streak of dry skin on the inside of each arm. Yuck, he made a face. It's a creepy crud. Ew. But the doctor didn't call it that. In fact, he had no name for Emily's strange rash at all. He gave Michael's mom some ointment to put on it and said to watch it for a few days. If it didn't go away or if it got worse, he wanted to see Emily again. Later that night, after putting Emily to bed, Michael's parents went to a neighborhood watch meeting, leaving Michael in charge. He stretched out in his bed doing his homework, and when he suddenly heard his sister giggling in her room down the hall. It sounded like she was having a ball in there. He glanced at the clock in agitation. She should be asleep by now. Closing his notebook, he marched down the hall and opened the door to his sister's room. You're supposed to... Oh! He started to scold her, but the words caught in his throat. Emily was sitting up and holding her hand outward, moving her fingers slightly in a circular motion. In the dim glow from the night light near her bed, he could see that her eyes were gleaming a very dull red. Look, Mikey, I can do it, just like Pop said. Turning to see where Emily was pointing, Michael gasped. Several of Emily's toys were suspended in the air, moving in a lazy circle as if under the grip of some strange force. A sudden flash of lightning lit up the fantastic scene, and Michael choked back a scream. I can do it real good, she added with satisfaction. Watch! Her eyes glowed with a brighter crimson, and the toys began to orbit around the room faster and faster. Stop it, Emily! What are you doing? The toys suddenly dropped to the floor, and Emily began to cry. You scared me, Michael. Michael backed slowly out of the room and raced to the phone to call the neighbor's house where his parents were. But when his dad got on the phone, he knew he'd never be able to explain what he'd seen. Just get home, Dad, and hurry. Wait a minute, Mike, his dad said, trying to calm him down after he heard the story. That's crazy. You must have made a mistake. No, Dad, thinking you see something in the corner that isn't there, that's a mistake. This was a bunch of toys flying through the air right past my head. I'm not making it up. I know what I saw. She's asleep, his mom announced as she entered the living room. Her room looks just the same as when we left it, Michael. Now, honey, she walked over to him and gently combed back his hair with her fingers. I hear what you're saying, but there must be some other explanation. Michael pulled away from his mother in frustration. Look, it's late, his dad said firmly. We'll talk about it in the morning. Fine, Michael said, angry at not being believed. He stomped upstairs to his room. Later that night, a crash of thunder woke Michael from his dead sleep. Blinking, he saw a small, pale figure beside his bed. Emily, he nearly shouted, sitting up with a start. Mikey, his sister said, close to tears. They said I have to go with them. Will you go too, Mikey? Michael rubbed his eyes. What are you talking about?
They found a place to come through, Mikey. I know I have to go, but I want you to go with me. I'll miss you too much if you don't.
Michael looked into the sweet face of his little sister. In the past, he might have told her she was dreaming and sent her back to bed. But after what he'd seen that night, he didn't know what to think. Come on, he said soothingly. I'll take you. I'll stay in your room with you tonight. They aren't going to take you anywhere. Grabbing a pillow and blanket, Michael followed Emily down the hall and stretched out on the floor beside her small bed. Soon he could hear the slow, even breathing that meant she had fallen asleep. But he wasn't so lucky. The storm grew even more intense, and the trees outside the window cast strange shadows on the ceiling. Michael watched them shifting, then all at once he realized that there was something else on the ceiling, or rather, in it. From where he lay, Michael had made out what looked like a small dark hole in the ceiling. To his amazement, it was growing wider and wider right before his eyes. Feeling his heart start to pound, he then saw two figures slipping through the opening and into the room. Silhouetted for a moment against the window, the two figures moved toward his sister's bed. Gripped by terror, Michael felt as if he were made of stone. He had to do something. The figures were reaching for Emily. No! He screamed, finally leaping to his feet. But as he did, one of the beings whirled toward him and tossed him away as easily as a discarded shoe. Suddenly, the door to Emily's room flew open and the overhead light snapped on, flooding the place with light. Michael took in the scene along with his startled parents, who were now at the door. Two creatures, tall with scaly pale blue skin and leathery wings tucked down at their shoulders, were standing there. One had Emily in its arms, while the other raised its hand and released a surge of something that looked like lightning. For a moment, both the creatures' eyes glowed a dim red. "You will remain where you are," one of them ordered in a tinny voice. Oddly enough, Michael felt that he had sensed the command rather than heard it. He wanted to call out to his parents to run to them as hard as he could not budge. He could not budge. By their inaction, he knew that his parents must be somehow paralyzed as well. The creature continued, "We do not want to harm you in any way. We have come from a world and time far in the future to correct a terrible mistake." Michael and his parents watched in disbelief, still unable to move as the creature spoke again. "We do not expect you to understand, but somehow, for a short time, 2 of your years ago, an unpredicted tear opened in the thin veil of space-time that separates our world from yours." As the being spoke, Michael noticed that two other figures entered through the dark opening in the ceiling. They appeared to be two females, one an adult covered in the same pale blue scales as the other creature. The other was a child who looked much like Emily. "This woman from our world and her newborn child slipped through the rift and became lost for only a few moments. We, we managed to pull them back before the tear sealed, so we thought. But as the child grew, we attempted to instruct her in the use of her powers. She could not seem to learn. Our mistake became clear to us. We had recovered an Earth infant instead of our own child. This child who you believe to be your daughter is ours," the being said, tenderly stroking Emily's hair. Now she didn't seem to be afraid. "We have tried for quite a while to return your Earth child and take back our own. Now we have succeeded in bridging the gap that separates our worlds, but we must hurry. We have only a short time to correct our mistake." Michael looked at Emily as she ran happily into the arms of the alien woman approaching her. "No!" Michael heard his mother struggling to cry out the words. "She's our babies. You can't take her." "We have no choice," the creature answered as he gently nudged forward the other frightened child, who did look entirely human. "I know you must love her, but she can no longer stay with you. As infants, our two life forms seem to look much alike. But as Emily grows, she will become as we are. You would have soon learned the truth if we had not come to make the exchange." He reached out and turned Emily's small arm to the light. The dried skin Michael had seen earlier was now a distinct covering of pale blue scales. "You see, the change has already begun. She will have no place here soon, and if not directed properly, the powers she possesses could be very, very dangerous." Emily turned to her new family and smiled.
I want to go. I want to be with Pop Pops.
And with that, one of the creatures gripped her small hand, guided her toward the opening, and lifted her through. Before the last creature slipped away, it glanced at Michael and his parents almost kindly, raised its hand, and shone a pale blue beam into their eyes. "Do not worry. In moments none of you will remember this has ever been taken place. It will be easier that way. Please look at the blinky thing." Then it departed, and the hole closed behind it. Michael felt the paralysis and held him suddenly released. He looked over at his parents, who seemed to be almost in a trance. Then his dad smiled as his mother sat on the edge of the bed and took her new daughter in her arms.
"Don't be frightened, Emmy,"
she soothed, obviously not remembering this wasn't Emmy.
"It's only a storm. Mommy and Daddy are here."
Michael took a step toward his family, then stopped. His new baby sister was looking over his mom's shoulder at a doll across the room. Her eyes began to glow red, and she reached out her hand. Michael gasped as the doll flew through the air to her chubby, outstretched hand.
"Mom, Dad, those creatures, they were wrong. She did learn. She has the power."
"What are you talking about, Mike?" his father asked. "Stop it, you'll frighten your sister."
"Dad, that thing is not my sister. It's not uh, uh,
Michael looked deep into the little girl's glowing eyes and felt a deep sense of dread.
I,
He started, then stopped. He couldn't recall what it was he'd wanted to say. It seemed important, but now he just couldn't remember. You've just heard tonight's story from Storylink Radio's Countdown to Halloween 2023. Remember to come back for our next tale. Many more stories of all genres available to listen to and read along with now on our website at www.storylinkradio.com. Visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/storylinkradio. And visit our podcast for easy mobile listening anywhere, anytime. Just search for Storylink Radio on your favorite podcast provider. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click that alert bell for Storylink Radio.